I mean, we cut off a whole row. No one's gonna know. Hi friends, Tracy here from the Sewing Channel. Welcome back. Today's video is all about using our quilting craft to make charity quilts for others. This is just one of many quilt patterns that you can make for charity quilts. They're easy. You can throw any print in here and it'll work. Check the description box below. I have information just for you so that you can make the right quilt for the right charity. Enough talking already. Let's get going. This charity quilt is not going to quilt itself. Now, something to keep in mind is you don't have to necessarily use 10.5-inch squares. You can use any size square that you want. And also, using more or less squares will change your end result size in the end. So you might want this bigger or you might want this to be smaller. Now, I did choose all of my novelty fabric to make my charity quilt, but you just may have some layer cakes that are in your stash that would work perfectly for a charity project just like this. So go get them. What are you waiting for? Once you have all of your squares all cut up or already pre-cut, go ahead and just place them up on your design wall in a light dark sequence. That way, no two fabrics that go next to each other will be too darks or too lights. The next thing I did was to grab in column style all of the squares down the first column and just sew those all together and then put them back up there, and then I grabbed the next column. Now I had 9 across and 9 down, so that's how many I had. Hey, it looks good right now. Maybe I should just call it a day and just sew this all up, right? No, we're gonna keep on chopping. No matter the size block that you end up cutting for this charity quilt or quilt in general, just cut it into thirds, and 3 into 10.5 ended up being 3.5 inches in strip size that I was going to cut. So that was 3 sets per long column. And it's a lot, friends. I ain't gonna kid you. I mean, that's a lot of strips, right? Now, this was the tricky part for me, was mixing this all up. And you just want to make sure that you have light and dark still next to each other. And that's not a problem because the way you cut it and the way you laid it out to begin with, you have, you know, the sequencing right. But I found it hard that once I went to sew this up, I just found that I had 2 next to each other that were matching, and I don't like that. But anyways, more on that later. So what you're going to do once you get them all mixed up is to grab them one by one and sew them end to end, making one big, huge, long strip in the end. And I know this should remind you of a jelly roll race quilt, as it should. It's totally the same concept. It's just we're not using jelly roll strips. We made them ourselves out of squares and then sliced them. So yeah, kind of the same thing. So once you have your strip set from end to end, one big long strip, and you can see it's a lot of mess right there, you're then going to offset the other end. So you're going to grab one end and then the other end. And you can see here off to the right on my board, I ended up slicing off a chunk at the one end because I had 2 similar prints. And you know, I am not going to put 2 similar prints next to each other if I can help it. So once I found the other end and I matched them up and I offset them so that no seam allowances had to compete with each other, I then kind of laid them next to each other flat and then pinned them up in loops up on the back of my design wall. That just made it a lot easier as I was grabbing at my sewing machine, that I didn't have this one big huge ball on my floor. I mean, I've done jelly roll race quilts before and had that big blob on the floor, but now that I have this design wall, I just, you know, pin them up behind me, right? And yes, go ahead, turn on one of my videos while you do this, because this first long stitch is the longest. I'm not sure how long it took me. I should have timed it. I don't know. I could probably look back in my video, but anyways, it does take a long time, that very first long stretch. But just settle in and just enjoy your sewing journey on this one. Now, for most of us quilters, the hard part is totally not making this quilt and giving it away because we do it all the time, right? But when you're making a charity quilt, there are some specifics that you need to know. Kristen over at Scrap Fabric Love here on YouTube has done an extensive amount of work on getting a list together of all of these charities that do accept quilts, but they do have very strict specifications on some of them. So you want to make sure that you click that link. I will put it in the description box below, and you will head on over to her blog and she will share with you the whole list. It's right there. It's very informative, friends. And it's not only for the US, I believe it's the UK and Canada as well. So head on over there when you're done with this video so that you know where and what and when and the how-tos on how to give your charity quilts to the right people. Okay, but back to our charity quilt today that we're making in my video. So when you get to the very end where you're sewing those two pieces together, I stay about 1/4 inch away from the very, very end, and there's like a fold there. Well, that is where you want to cut those two pieces. And I sewed them up, and then I'm cutting on the fold, which then when you open this up, you're going to see that now I have 2 strip sets that are all sewn together and ready for the next step. Friends, the hardest part for me was trying to find the ends once I sewed the whole strips together. But once you find them, you find them. And I pin them up again up to my wall. But now you can open them up as you go, or just I plopped them down on the floor and then I opened them up. And here you can actually make a decision. I laid that set of strips, the ends, next to each other on one side and then on the other side to see if there was any that were matching that I didn't want to match there. But remember, yes, you have to stagger those seams as well. And I did cut off some excess there because I wanted, to start at a lower print than where I was at, but more on that later. So here I'm just sewing now 4 individual strips together. I'm sewing the 2 and the 2 together, and I'm pinning them up behind me on my wall, which made it a ton easier. And then I would just grab them down and sew them up. And just when I wasn't looking, don't you know it, I accidentally had sewn 2 of my gray owl fabrics right on top of each other. Now, how I did not notice that, I couldn't even tell you, but I did not notice it until this moment right here. Yeah. So I'm not leaving that because I can't. So I unpicked that. I know it's the whole randomness of putting this together. That's why it's, everybody loves this method or technique because it's just random, and wherever the fabrics lay, they lay. But there's no way I can let those 2 grays lay on top of each other like that. So yes, I unpicked that portion and then I added in another portion. So yeah, call me crazy, but I think you would too if you've seen those together, right? Let me know in the comments if you would have totally changed that. Okay, friends, it's all fixed and I'm feeling a lot better now at this point. So now I'm just going to open everything up, and I'm not going to press it yet. I don't end up pressing until the very end because, the seams, you're not really needing any certain seam to lay really flat for you. So it was a no-brainer just to wait until the end. But here I'm just opening everything up and shaking them open because, they kind of didn't want to come open. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to lay on the one side and the other side, and I'm going to check to make sure that no prints were lookalikes because, I wasn't having that again. And then I just found the other end there and pinned it together, and yeah, and just looped it up just like I did before right up on my design wall. And you can see it's growing pretty fast, right? Now, if you get tangled when you come to the very end where that loop would be, you can continue sewing up to that point and then cut it and then untwist it at the end, or you can take it all down and re-put put it back up together so that you're all laying flat right along. But I found that if you had it twisted early on when the widths of the strips were still skinny, you were fine. But after this level right here, after I put this together, I made sure that everything was laying flat all the way up to the very end fold. So then that way I just really didn't have to mess with it. But just know that if you do get it twisted, it's not a big deal. You just trim it and, you know, enough far away from the fold, and then you can put it back underneath your sewing machine and then sew right up to where that fold is. I hope that makes sense. It really wasn't a big deal, but if you have things laying nice and flat at the beginning, that really works to your advantage in the end. And a couple times I had mine twisted, just saying. So I'm making another cut here, and I'm just folding it and just slicing it right across there. No big deal. It doesn't even matter if you're really that straight, because in the end, after it's all quilted, we're going to trim this quilt, you know, straight, angled and stuff. So no worries there. So here I'm just putting it up on the design wall, and now I have 6 strips to 6 strips. And again, I'm just making sure that I have no lookalikes next to each other. I mean, in the end, I think I have a lot that are close together that I really wish were not close together, but hey, it is what it is. And then I just flip them together and then sew all the way down. And as with any quilt, as it grows, it's a lot harder to wrangle. And this quilt was no exception. I was at the sewing machine struggling a bit to hold all of this together. You can see I did sling one up on my shoulder here, so that way it just kind of, you know, fed into the sewing machine nicely. But they do get big and awkward, especially when they're not pressed. So, and here was this cut here, and I'm just, you know, slicing along here. And look at, ooh, it's getting bigger, and it's getting harder for me to handle too. Look, I don't even know which end is which after I'm looking at this, doing this voiceover. But I do believe that this is our very last attachment. And so I'm just checking out here, and look at those 2 blacks I can see, or 3 blacks. Oh my goodness, with the aqua hearts. So then I move it over here to see, do I end up going this way? I forget, but yeah, I don't know why I struggle with that. I just really didn't want the prints next to each other. So once I figured that out, then I just kind of tried to lay it all nice and flat. And then, you know, I took that very last leg of the quilt here, and then I cut it. And then, yeah, look at that. Oh, but wait, I do have a fix here. That's right. So now for this part, because I, you know, was being finicky and I started and stopped at different points because I wanted certain fabrics not to touch, I have some that are kind of indented here, and I wanted to use and utilize the whole width of this quilt. So all I did was just add in some of that I took out earlier and just cut a straight line and just sewed it in and grafted it in. I mean, it was super easy. It does not look like the rest because it's a straight seam, but you know what? It is what it is, and nobody can tell, I don't think anyways. But yeah, and here's this quilt top. Hey, looks pretty good. It's big too. The quilt top ended up being 72 by 92 inches in the end. Next, I sandwiched my quilt with some very thin polyester batting that I had hanging around that I needed to use up. Now, I did use a sheet from the Goodwill that I had thrifted. It's a nice cotton vintage sheet, and it's done in a cream color, and it was in such good shape I couldn't pass it up for a couple bucks. Now it's time to free motion quilt our quilts, because you know I do it myself. Here I'm utilizing the top of my Laura Star cart there with a binder clip, attaching it to my quilt. And then on the other side, the same thing, an elastic band with some binder clips. And that helps with any drag that I might have, because you need to keep those edges of your quilt top up while you're free motion quilting. Otherwise, it's going to be pulling and you're going to have some really jagged stitches. I used to have a different setup, but since I put up my design wall, all of my regular hooks are gone. So I had to kind of make do for this video for this particular quilt in order to get some free motion quilting done. So here you can see my big table. I love my Juki table. All the links will be down below. This is like the best setup ever. Yes, my sewing machine is totally turned on its side. That is the beauty of this Juki and this table insert that you can get for your Juki. It makes things so much easier to free motion quilt. Trust me when I tell you. So here I'm just doing a simple meander for this quilt. I mean, when you have such a busy pattern of prints going on in your quilt, a meander is gonna get lost anyways, so you're better off just to do the meander, and that's exactly what I did. I love to free motion quilt, and I have several videos, and I'll link the best one here at the end of this tutorial to share with you just how easy step by step it is to free motion quilt. Some of you may be scared, I know, but hey, how are you going to get over that? And how are you going to even do it unless you just need to start, right? I mean, you have to start, friends. And so I take you from absolute start to absolute finish on how to free motion quilt with thread and needle, what you need, the whole ins and outs. I'll link it at the end. Now that I've put this free motion quilt meander quilting all over this quilt, it's time to square it up and get the binding on it. So the first thing I do when I square up these quilts is I tend to go for the corners first. Now my backing was not quite big enough. It is on this side because it's a sheet. It was just like an inch shy on the other side. So I may have to cut into the block. I'm not sure yet. So the first thing I'm going to do though is to cut this corner off and then see what I have on the other sides. Because we want nice angles at our corners for sure. We want it to all be the same size, like, you know, the top of this, we want the same width as the bottom. But what matters the most, I think, is that this is square. So. Now I know I'm going to have to come in a little bit because, you know, this fabric juts out a little bit. And probably on this side too. So that's why I'm making the square inward just a bit. And I'm also looking at the lines within the quilt too. But a lot of times you'll find that you're not really square when you think you are. But if you can kind of put those within a mid-range, then I think, you know, it'll all work out. I don't normally use my rotary cutter backwards, but my camera's in the way, so I have to. You know, because I got to get the shot for you all, right? Come on now and hit that like and subscribe. This is a lot of work. At least like the video. You don't always have to be a subscriber, so just like it. Okay, now this one I can tell right away. You see, look at, and that's got a cut in it too. So I'm going to have to cut this whole block off, I'm pretty sure. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to come up here. And I'm going to come to here, here. And I am just going to slice it off. It is what it is, friends. That was that part that wasn't going quite as far as it should have, as far as the sheet went. This is one big quilt. Wow. I can't get over how big this is. Okay. I'm not used to making these this long. This one will be fine as far as the squaring up goes. And you can see here, this juts out way more. So we're going to want to cut that off in the end. Hopefully that matches up with that pink paw print down there. We'll see. If it doesn't, we'll just take more off. No big deal. This is a big enough quilt we can. Okay, I think that was all four. Oh, I need a bigger cutting table. I just don't have the room, friends. I really don't. Okay, let's get this piece off of here. So next I'm just going to take my square here. This is the biggest square ruler that I own. And I'm just going to line this back up. And then I'm going to take this and I'm going to line it up this way. And then I'm just going to take this layer off. Now I'm going to take this square ruler and put it over here and line that up. Make sure that that's nice and square. I'm trying to get a straight cut out of this. This is the one that has to go. So I'm going to square that up. Yes, yes, yes. And then I'm just going to cut that. I'm just going to take it down and just slice that. Okay, that's done. And then come over here and then just slice this up. Kind of stinks that that has to go, but it does. I mean, we can't put binding on a quilt that doesn't have any backing on it, right? Okay. I need a sewing room makeover, friends. I do. Any companies out there that want to sponsor me to do a sewing room makeover? Oh yeah, I'm in. Send them my way, friends. Because there just is no room here. Imagine if I had a long arm. Oh my goodness. No, no, no. That's why I don't have one, because I don't want to mess with it. It's just easier for me just to throw it on my sewing machine and do it, right? Okay, so when I line this up, so it was, you know, we are going to have to take some of that off, which is okay, because we've squared this up down here, and now we've added this ruler, butted it up here, and I think we're good to go. Now we'll just come down here. Because I'm lining up here where that we know was squared up, and then down here. And you know what, friends? We're just going to slice it off. This quilt is so busy, no one is even going to know. I mean, we cut off a whole row. No one's going to know. One more side to trim. That's why I think for beginner quilters, borders are a no-go. Because what happens when you're beginning quilting and you have borders, sometimes you're at an angle and you have to cut off more than you need to, or more than you should normally have to. So when you go to edge with your piecing, you don't have to worry about none of that. I mean, that's beginner style. That I would say that's good. Oh my goodness. Not too bad. Make sure that you're straight. Your table might be like mine, jacked up. Yay! The true test is, though, when you go to fold it up and, you know, see how uneven you really are. Trust me, friends, I've done it before when I've been uneven and I've been like, you gotta be kidding me. How'd I do that, right? Check out this lovely quilting on the back, right? Oh my goodness, I love it. The front, you really cannot see the quilting because, you know, it's busy. Let's fold it up just for GP and see how off I am. So I just folded it in half on this side. I haven't even looked yet. And here you can see, here's the fold. Oh my goodness, this thing is huge. Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Not too bad, not too bad. We're not that off. We're not that off at all. Enough to where I'm gonna say it's good. Okay, let's take a look at this thing. My very first charity quilt. The question still remains, am I a charity quilter? I think I just might become one. The final size of this quilt ended up being 69.5 by 90.5 inches long, which I think I got the dimensions wrong to begin with because I cut off a whole row. So I don't know, the math isn't mathing, but it was never my strong suit. So whatever number I told you earlier, I think it's wrong. Like the finished quilt top anyways, before I quilted it, I don't know. The last thing to do for this quilt is bind it and pick my charity. Take a look at your screen right now. That video I promised you to know how to free motion quilt, it's on your screen right now, and some other stuff that I think that you will totally be into. Click the like button, click the subscribe button. Oh yeah, and don't forget, click that link for where to find all the charities at. Until next time on the Sewing Channel, take care.